Hi, I'm Krista West of Avlea Folk Embroidery, and here is another mini floss tube. Today's mini floss tube is on the Oak Park Diamonds table runner, this design. So I'm just going to take a little time and talk to you about how I developed this design, about it, that sort of a thing. Because I've discovered that it's much easier for me if I break up the floss tubes into smaller segments about a single design rather than trying to do a big long hour. So let's jump in. Most of you probably already know me if you found this floss tube. I'm Krista West of Avlea Folk Embroidery. I specialize in folk embroidery designs, usually from the Mediterranean, Ukrainian, Balkan, Latvian, Romanian folk embroidery traditions. Today is definitely a departure from that. So this will be my very sort of first departure from folk embroidery. If you want to see all my stuff, you can find it at the website. It'll be in the notes. You can also follow along on Instagram. I really like to use Instagram as a place to kind of post my works in progress, what I'm thinking about, what I'm working on, new releases. I like all those Instagram photos to be just like beautiful photos of embroidery so that it's just sort of a little bit of beauty in your little Instagram feed. So let's jump in. So, I have always had a real soft spot for geometric designs in folk embroidery. Some of my very first forays into folk embroidery, about maybe 15, 16 years ago now, were all over repeating designs, like Salerno tile at my website, or things like chloris. These are really common in Greek folk embroidery. I haven't seen them as much in other traditions, but in Greek folk embroidery, and I think it was probably maybe starting probably like mid to later 20th century, there's this tradition that comes up of table runners that are designed with these all over repeating geometric designs. So they look a lot like mosaics or tile work or things like that. And I love all those things. And not only do I love that like soothing repetition, I really like the meditative quality of these kind of stitching projects. I love big stylized designs where you've got to really follow the chart, but I also really enjoy working into kind of my own stitching, having designs that are kind of really easy to get in my hoop or in my Q-snap and just kind of keep going, not really have to refer to the chart. I particularly like geometric designs when I'm traveling, if I'm on a plane, that kind of a thing, or if it's like just I want to stitch in the evening but I just don't want to think about following a pattern, or I've been designing all day and just can't deal with looking at another grid or whatever. So I've always been really drawn to these designs. I also think they're unique because they offer a wonderful opportunity for lots of playing around with color and creating unique color palettes, because you're not trying to make the design look like anything. So for example, if I was working on a design with a leaf, then I would feel like, oh, maybe that leaf does need to have something in the green or like olive green or gold range. But with a geometric design, nothing is stylized. It's just all lines and diamonds and trapezoids and chevrons and herringbones and all these different patterns. And so you can really have a lot more fun with the colorway because they're not realistic really to anything. So when my older daughters were little, one of their favorite Dover coloring books, those of you who are familiar with Dover coloring books, was the Frank Lloyd Wright stained glass coloring book. Now, if you've never seen this coloring book, it's a really awesome coloring book. I'm a huge fan of Dover Publications. I bought all their coloring books for my kids when they were little. I just loved all their fashion stuff. And I mean, so there's a little plug for Dover Publishing. They're fantastic. And they're like really affordable. And anyways, it's a really great company to support. Lots of great stuff there. But they had these Frank Lloyd Wright designs that are on this stained glass paper. So the idea is that you make you color the design in, and then you put it up against a window or something. Let me see if I can figure that out. Against a window, and then the design will come through. Well, I've always just been so drawn to all the designs in here. A number of years ago, I got to visit Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. I actually went a couple of times. I had an annual commitment in Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh. And Falling Water isn't too far from Pittsburgh. And so I convinced my husband one morning, like, okay, we have to go see Falling Water. I can't be this close to Falling Water. And it was really, honestly, just this amazing experience to go in and see that his house, Falling Water, that's cantilevered over a waterfall. The family that had him design Falling Water, for those of you who are not familiar, Frank Lloyd Wright, big architect, 1930s, very specific style, very beautiful style, I think. I'm a big fan of Frank Lloyd Wright. And this big department store owner in the I think it was the late 1920s or 1930s, asked him to build a house for them that sat near this stream because they loved going out to this area in the country and sitting by the water and relaxing. And Frank Lloyd Wright, in true Frank Lloyd Wright style, built it cantilevered over this little like stream. So it actually has all these properties when you go in, like there's natural air conditioning by these like trap doors that are in the floors. And it just has this incredible sense of harmony. And what a lot of people don't realize about Frank Lloyd Wright is that he often designed textiles that went with his with his buildings, with his architectural plans. And one of the things I love at Falling Water is that they have those on the couches. They have these like beautiful embroidered cushions that like kind of all coordinate. So it's a very holistic, creative style. It's like this whole thing he's going for. He has a very clear vision in his mind of what he's going for. And I've always been really drawn to that style, which also is known as prairie style architecture. So it was sometime this last winter, we were at it was this last January, actually. It was almost a year ago. And my eldest daughter was visiting from out of town, and we had our little granddaughter with us, and we decided to take her to the Gilbert House Children's Museum here in Salem, Oregon. Now, the Gilbert House was a private residence for many years, and with the growth of the city and the building of a freeway and this sort of a thing, it ended up being sold to the Gilbert House and Museum. And it's a children's museum. It's really fun. You go in, it's this great big old house, and every room's got something fun in it. So my little granddaughter was running all around, and we were going into the different rooms and seeing all the different exhibits, and it was really fun. And as we're leaving, we're walking out the two main doors, and the two main doors have this stunning leaded glass window work. It's kind of funny because the light is such that you can't really, you see the designs coming in, but going out, they're just glowing because they're lit from behind, and they're just incredible and beautiful. And they have these very distinctive bars that go on this kind of like, almost like this mountaintop shape. And I just snapped a quick picture of it because I was like, I don't know, there's something about that that's so compelling to me. And it's been on my design board since then, since January. And finally, around this past summer, I was like, okay, I gotta see if I can play around with that and figure out how to turn that into something that I can stitch, because it looks to me, it has this kind of same aesthetic harmony with the kind of all over designs that I've seen in Greece, but with a little bit more structure. And I really was like drawn to that. So I sat down and I started designing. And of course, when I first designed it, I couldn't get the proportions right because turning the leaded glass window, it was too short and squat. It was actually really funny. I put it to the Pamela test. Pamela is my workshop assistant. And so I will, when I'm designing something, if I'm just like too close to it, I'll show it to Pamela and be like, what do you want? And Pamela's very polite. So she'll go, oh, that's very nice. But every once in a while she goes, oh, and she gasps, and I'm like, awesome. Just passed the Pamela test. And she saw the first version and she was like, oh, it's nice, but it looks a little squat. And I was like, yeah, actually, it looks really squat. It looked like kind of fat and stubby, and it just didn't have that feeling of like a window. So I went back to the drawing board and I kept charting until I got a longer version of it. So this is now the longer version. And then I was like, okay, I had all these empty spaces here that it created because this leaded glass window didn't have any etching in it. The original doesn't have any etching designs. So I went back and found prairie style architecture ornamentation that was used in windows and on cabinetry and things like that. And I used that to put in these little diamond motifs that almost have these little, like, they look like little star trails. I kind of like them. They remind me of like little shooting stars. And so then I popped those in, and then suddenly the design just clicked. It was the right proportions. It was the right elements. It was just that right balance of something restful and serene, but with that little ornamented detail, which provided that intricacy. And I was just in love. I had a ton of fun stitching it because it was like, it's all straight lines. So it's really, really easy to stitch. And when I was choosing the color palette, I was like, I want to stay with something that kind of feels like the 1930s. And I feel like that rosewood color and the tealy blues, those are colors that were definitely used in the 20s in paler versions. So you can have things like oyster beige, which is actually a beige with a lot of red undertones, being used in the 1920s. In fact, it's actually what I painted my living room of my 1920s home. And then you have these like warm tealy blues coming in because you have all the influence of Art Deco and Art Nouveau coming in, and these colors start getting a little bit more intense and even warmer. And that's when you get to these kind of warm rosewoods and tealy blues by the 1930s. So I went ahead and started stitching, and I just loved it. It's a simple little design. I really love the style, the size that it makes. It makes a really nice kind of narrow table runner, which I find really useful. I've had it on my entryway, I've had it on my dining room table, I've kind of moved it all around. And it's just a really fun little design. So that's the little backstory about how I designed Oak Park diamonds. Thanks for watching.